everyone, my name's Michelle with The Book Dragon, and today we've got author Rachel Jones, and she's going to speak to us about her book Dregs, which is on book two this week at The Book Dragon. Hi, Rachel.
Hi there, how are you going?
Oh, good, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
So just bear in mind I'm in Australia time, so it's 7 p.m. here.
All right, so you just getting towards the end of your day, and I'm just starting mine. So
Yeah,
thankfully, I've got
pretty
a big
much.
cup of coffee behind me, which is actually the cover of Dregs. So, Eva very kindly agreed to answer some questions for our viewers. So I'll kick right off with those. So the first piece in your collection of poems and short stories, Dregs, is the Viking poem, which was written when you were only 9 years old. You were obviously a
Yes.
creative child, so I was wondering what ignited this spark in you.
Um, Both my parents were teachers, and they were so keen that they brought their children up with a love of books and words. So my mum read to me and my brother poetry from when we were born. So some of the first things that we ever heard were poems, obviously, appropriate poems. So things like Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats and Hilaire Belloc and stuff like that. All of those, Edward Lear, and so we were read poems from when we were babies.
Mhm.
So that kind of that rhythm gets into your head, and you're able to make poems and rhythm, I think, naturally because it flows in you because you've heard
Right.
it so regularly. So yeah, that was what got me into poetry at a very young age, and I love to read it. And the Viking one, I don't know why I wrote one about a Viking because I didn't really know much about Vikings, but I think it's because there was a story I read once with a giant who had birds in his beard.
Okay,
I
yeah.
can't even remember the story, but he had like birds nesting in his beard, and I just kind of developed on that. I was only 9, so I was, it was fairly naive. But the first ever poem I remember writing was one when I used to have a rabbit, and my rabbit died, and I wrote this kind of in memoriam poem for my rabbit, which was it was pretty. It wasn't great. It wasn't the best poem in the world, but it was something that I wrote, and I wrote it because I had feelings. So I
Yeah.
learned that you can write poetry with and express feelings, and
Yeah,
I've
that
never
probably
really
helped
changed.
you.
Yeah, I've never changed. If I've wanted to write out feelings, it's always been through poetry because I think I think that's the poet's curse. I'm not sure, but to write a poem seems to somehow get that out of you easier than talking about it, you know. And I've written poetry on the back of the labels off bean cans and, all sorts. Yeah, just because it's got to get written. Yeah,
Just to get it out of you and yeah. No, that's lovely. I think it's really important that you can express your emotions that way, and it probably actually helped you with the grieving process.
it
Yeah.
did. Yeah, I mean, I can vaguely remember the rabbit, but I can just about remember the poem. But yeah, it must have, as a child, it must have meant something to me to write a poem about it because I can't remember writing that. That's the first thing I can remember writing.
Yeah.
Was the poem for the rabbit. So yeah.
Oh, thank you
Who
for
knew I
sharing
was going
that.
to aspire to such great things, eh?
I know, it's just the start, the first one in a long journey. So, are any of the poems or short stories in Dregs based on experiences or people from your own life? You just talked about the rabbit situation, but how about any in the book?
Yeah, there's one in Dregs called Jim Builds a Chariot.
Mhm.
Um, and that is actually inspired by a true story. So I'm not now because I've changed my role, but I was a palliative care nurse. And we had a patient who was poorly for a long time, and he started to make plans for his end. And part of his thing was he wanted to paint his own coffin. And that's quite common in some cultures, but to me, it was a new thing. I hadn't really heard of it because us Brits do, fairly solemn funerals and wakes, and we're not kind of into this sort of demonstrating, death as a whoopee sort of thing. But he started decorating his own coffin and invited his children and grandchildren to come and paint their names on it. I mean, in my story, it's a different setup. There's more to it than that, but that kind of was the inspiration for that story. That this man wanted to have his coffin during his funeral with all the family's names on it. And he also he was telling me that it gave him a chance to talk to his family individually, each one of them, as you know, about his imminent sort of passing.
Yeah.
And it just struck me as being a really amazing way to deal with it. And since then I've seen other cultures, like there's some of the Aboriginal cultures are similar. They'll decorate coffins, but usually after the person's passed away. So they'll put the football team colours, or they'll do the dot paintings and stuff. Not all, but some. So yeah, it's something that I'd never heard of ever.
Yeah. It's
So
such a
it's sort of stuck in
beautiful
my mind.
story. Very
It
moving.
is. It is very moving. It is.
Yeah.
And so I made it have that little slight humorous twist, because you know it's sad, but I could just sort of see my character in the story doing it, and people sort of rolling their eyes a little bit, and bloody thing is taking up all the room, and you know. But yeah, so that was that story. And the other poem in the book that really means a lot to me is Leave Not a Piece of Me Behind. Now I wrote that because my father passed away from COVID during the very first days of COVID in the UK, and obviously we weren't able to come over to do the funeral, and I wanted to write something for the funeral, so that was read out at his funeral.
Oh wow.
And I wanted it to be a thing of hope rather than a mournful one, you know. And it was kind of just because my dad was always full of laughter, and you know, a real kind of inspiration for me from my humor I get from my father. He was the
Well,
one
thank
that
you to
used,
your father then.
yeah, he was the one that used to play the goons to me for when I was little and stuff like that. So my humor came from him. So I wanted to honor him like that, and that's a very personal poem for me. I mean, I didn't put it in the book as what, you know, this is what this is about,
Yeah.
but that was very personal for me, that one.
Yeah, it's another really
Dregs.
beautiful one. I found that really moving as well.
Yeah, it's because it's from the heart, you know.
Yeah, and you can tell for sure.
Mm. I'm
So,
trying to think what else is in Dregs, if there's anything
yeah.
else. Most of it is it has been through kind of prompts or ideas, but the two that are real from real life are those two for sure.
hmm So, I mean, you might have already answered this because of what you said to the previous question, but which of the writing pieces in Dregs means the most to you and why?
Well, that poem,
Yeah.
obviously, because it's really meaningful.
Yeah.
I really like Effie's eye. It's because when I wrote it, I had this very clear image in my head of what I was writing, the minutiae of the focus of what I was writing about. And I really, really enjoyed writing it. So it's ever such a short piece. And I did the little kind of, I always throw in a bit of humor. I can't help it. It's in my DNA, sort of, you know, to make it a little bit lighter at the end. But it was a bit sort of 1984 and a bit, I don't know, it wasn't quite horror comedy, but it was very intense. When I wrote it, it was very intense, and I enjoyed the process of writing it. But I also enjoy the ones where I make up characters, like fantastical characters in ordinary situations. They always give me a kick to do it. Always gives me a kick to do that, where people aren't expecting things to happen. You know, like the gods in the bar.
Yes.
One more, no more. I like that. I just like that. I like the idea of gods being in a pub going, oh God, what a day, you know. So I like that crossover. I really enjoyed that crossover.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So Dregs 2 is now out. Can you tell our viewers what to expect from that?
Oh God, more of the same, really. Yeah. Poetry is a little bit darker because I've been exploring some other things. It's it definitely is an adult theme. It's not adult as in adult reading, but it's adult themed stuff. So it deals with some fairly dark subjects. But I'm actually really thrilled that my nephew has given me a poem which I put in it. And he was inspired by Brian Bilston, And I said, can I put your poem in my book? And he's like, yes, please. So I put it
Oh,
right at the beginning so he doesn't have to read the rest of the book, because the rest of the book is for grown-ups and he's only 11.
right.
But yeah, so that's that gene in us, our poetry gene. So I really wanted to put that in. So the poetry is a bit darker. I actually had more fun with the stories because I found my feet a little bit. So
Mhm.
I kind of was a bit more confident in what I was writing. Um, I also expanded on a geographical location, which is what's going to be in my novel. So I wrote some short stories with the link to that place because I wanted to
Okay.
build it. I was just, you know how when people write and they write around something to help
Mhm.
shape what they're writing in the middle.
Yeah.
So I just wrote some stories with set in that kind of world, just to help me have a little focus on what was going on. So I had some real fun with that. Um, and lots of looking at relationships between people, but in a through a different lens. So through a lens that you perhaps weren't expect. I come at things sideways. I was told once, "My God, Rachel, you think sideways?" Well, okay, that'll do. I don't mind that. That sounds like
Yeah.
a kind of. I think that's a compliment.
Yeah,
So
I'll
yeah,
take it as one.
it's more of the same. So short stories,
Mhm.
and poetry, um, and just I hope that people are able to just dip in and dip out and find something that sticks with them and enjoy it, or something that makes them go, "Oh my God, I need to lie down." But it's just sort of stuff to make you think, make you
Yeah,
feel
that's it.
provoking,
Having some effect
provoking
on
something.
someone. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not necessarily running to the GP, but a decent effect. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're working on a full-length novel, which I believe is going to be a magical realism novel.
Yeah, I didn't know what magical realism was. I was trying to find a genre for what I was writing, and I'm like, it's not fantasy. It's not
Mhm.
fantasy. It's not um, it's not absurdism. It's not surrealism. And then people said, what kind of stuff do you like? And I said, oh, I really like Neil Gaiman and how Neil Gaiman's worlds cross over
Yeah.
between here, now, there, then. And slip sort of just gently in from one to the other. And they said, that's magical realism. And I was like, oh, that's me. So yeah, I was really excited. And so magical realism was something that I went and learned more about the genre. And I realized that that's a lot of what I write. I don't write everything in that
Mhm.
genre, but this book is definitely well seated in that genre. I mean, at its heart, it's a story about a journey through loss and grieving.
Nice.
So it's very much a story about the human condition.
Mhm.
Um, but it looks at the way we form relationships, and it looks at the way that differences bind us together. So don't push us apart. Sometimes it's the differences that we need
Nice.
to
Yeah.
make a complete person. Um,
Mhm.
so that's kind of at its heart. Um, the serious themes I've written this down, as you can tell, but
Yeah, it's
the
fine.
serious themes are set in a reality that steps in and out of time and space and magical spaces. So it's just you're going to know where you are at any one
Mhm.
time. You're not going to think, hey, where am I? Am I in reality? Am I not in reality? You're going to know where you are. So I'll always have like a piece of string for you to be able to pull to get back to where you started from.
Mhm.
I'm not going to abandon you somewhere where you're like, oh, okay, right, not sure what's happening here. So there's always going to be that there. So my hero, my protagonist, is called Donna,
Mhm.
and she's a receptionist at a GP clinic, and you don't get much
Ah.
more kind of ordinary. I've been a receptionist at a GP clinic, so I'm not denigrating them. They do an amazing job in hard circumstances. Um, but she embarks upon an adventure that kind of inspires her and motivates her to make some changes in her life. You know, that it's a proper hero's journey that she
Yeah.
goes on. So some of the highlights are a cohort of demons called Steve. That's my husband's name. So he's like, why have you called all the demons Steve? I'm like, because it's a really good name, and I want you in my books. So, but they're good. These demons are called Steve. They look like the guys on the door at nightclubs with the black
Yeah,
jackets.
bouncers, yeah.
They all look like that. They're all called Steve, but they've all got different little quirks. So all my demons are called Steve. So yeah, probably should go to a psychologist about that. But there we are.
Hi to all the Steves out there.
I've got a tuner obsessed cat called Mr. Pajamas, who has been and seen and done everything. And he's probably a secondary character, so we follow a lot of the story through his eyes, which is interesting. He's not a talking cat; he's a thinking cat.
Right.
We've also got some 16th century lost souls dressed in nylon, because that's all they could get the clothes for them, like out of the 1979 Kay's catalogue. And they're all playing bingo for socks, because the socks are made of wool and they're fed up with the static. So yeah, it's quite a diverse cast of people.
Sounds amazing.
So it's a bit of a romp.
Yeah.
It's all set in this fictional town of Market Hale that I invented. I've created this town. I've also created a fictional online newspaper for Market Hale, which I need to update. So I've got some bona fide fake news going on,
Excellent.
like the town's biggest pumpkin competition and stuff like that. It's been, and it is continuing to be, fun to write, and I'm hoping it will be a lot of fun to read. But I'm also hoping that the message that I'm trying to get across will be there too. And there's a driving message behind it, a driving aspiration on my part behind it, but along the way the adventure is going to be fun.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us, Rachel. And thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to interview you.
So I've got some exciting news.
Ooh.
Apart from Dregs 2 coming out, which you're going to be seeing the physical copy before I do, so I'm hoping it's all right and not printed upside down. I'm actually off to Book Fair Australia in October, which is held in Sydney. So I'm in the Northern Territory, which is basically on the edge of the outback. So I'm going to drive there, and it's going to be a 5,000-mile round trip.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to pack some sandwiches because it might take
lots
a bit.
Of sandwiches.
Yeah. So it's 4 days to get there, 2 days or 3 days there, and then Steve's going to join me, and we're going to have a bit of a holiday coming up. So this is going to be this big adventure, this big thing. So I'm all about having the adventures now, because I'm sort of finding my feet as an author and finding my feet as a creative person. I'm still very much a nurse at heart, and I've got to see some amazing stuff. I'm now working with remote communities, so I'm doing off-road driving and going out to places where there's like 40 people live, and 6 hours from a shop type places. So I'm all about the adventure now. So I'm going to have this big road trip, which I'm going to try and put up on the site, on my website. Here I am now, and this is what it looks like, and this is how far I drove, and so it's going to be an adventure. So I'm going to represent the Northern Territory, so they don't know what's coming.
Look out, Sydney.
I know, right? They've got these lovely authors there with their lovely books and really nice displays, and I'm going to turn up covered in dust, with a sandwich hanging out of my pocket, like completely bleary-eyed, like, what day is it? Who am I? But yeah, so it should be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be an adventure, and and every day I pick up more stories from people, just listening to people. So I've got more stories that I'm collecting. There's not going to be a Dregs 3 because I can't think of a witty sort of subtitle, but I'll think of something else.
Plus you've got your magical realism novel.
I've got to get on with that. Yeah. I know, I need to finish it. So I'm 40,000 words into that.
Oh wow, well done you. That's brilliant.
So I need to get the nose to the grindstone and get that done, because I want to know what happens.
Yeah,
it's me.
The characters will have to tell you what they're going to be up to.
They pretty much do anyway. Yeah.
I know that feeling. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Rachel. Do you have any dates for the Sydney Book Fair?
It's the 14th and the 15th of October.
Yeah. So if anyone
So
happens to be in Sydney, go along and
yeah.
meet Rachel covered in dust.
I mean, there's going to be some really wonderful authors there. It's a really
Yeah.
big thing. It's a really,
Mhm.
and you had to apply and get vetted, and they said, "Can you send a profile picture?" So I thought I'd be really clever, and I sent a picture of myself with a head in a box, which was all a bit Jean-Paul Sartre. But yeah, yes. Anyway, and they sent back, like, "Are you a real human?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm definitely a real human."
Oh.
This is my book, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It should be great fun. So that's the next thing on the list. And then I've also applied for a grant from the Northern Territory Writers Centre to go on a writing retreat for 2 weeks.
Mm.
And that's in a place called Larimer. There's nothing there. There's the caravan park. So if I get out of there with both of my kidneys, I'll be really pleased. If I win the grant, because people go missing from there and they're never seen again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, that'll be fun. I'm going to try and write about that as I'm being dragged off into the desert by some sort of wolf-shaped creature. But yeah, so there's things happening in my life that are a lot of fun and very exciting.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you for sharing all that with us, Rachel. It's been really
No
good fun.
worries.
Been a pleasure to speak to you. And that's your books on tour all this week. So thank you for your time, Rachel. Bye for
No
now.
worries. See you, bye.